He had nothing left but a broken saddle, a stubborn horse, and $1 crumpled deep in his pocket, the last trace of his failed luck. Jeremiah Kane was once a rancher with dreams of building his own spread. But bad weather, bad debts, and worse, men had stripped him down to nothing. When he rode into the dusty border town of San Miguel, his face was thin, his eyes tired, and his spirit nearly crushed. Yet fate has a way of throwing the desperate into strange crossroads. That day, in the center of town, a cruel trader stood on a wagon, with a whip at his side, auctioning what should never be sold. A young Apache girl with fire in her eyes and iron in her spirit. Men tossed silver and gold into the air, bidding like wolves fighting over prey. But Jeremiah felt a strange pull. He didn't know her name, but something in the way she held her head high, refusing to bow, struck him harder than hunger ever had. His heart knew what his mind could not yet explain. If freedom had a face, it was hers. The bid soared higher, beyond reason, beyond anything Jeremiah could ever hope to touch. He almost turned away, knowing he had no place among those men. But when the trader laughed and threatened to break the girl's spirit with his whip, Jeremiah stepped forward, his boots heavy in the dust. $1, he said, his voice low but steady. The crowd roared with laughter, mocking him, spitting at his poverty. The trader sneered, ready to dismiss him. But something about Jeremiah's eyes, tired yet unyielding, made the man pause. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was amusement, or maybe the devil had whispered into the trader's ear that day. With a shrug, he tossed the rope at Jeremiah's feet. "Yours for $1, cowboy. Let's see if you can tame her." The crowd jeered, but Jeremiah didn't care. He handed over his last coin and cut the girl's bonds loose. For the first time in weeks, he felt like a man again. She did not thank him. She did not smile. She simply stared at him with the burning gaze of a hawk that had been caged too long. That night, by a dying fire outside of town, Jeremiah offered her bread. She did not eat. He asked her name. She did not speak. It was only when the coyotes howled in the distance that she finally whispered, "Naeli." Her voice was soft, but the syllables carried the weight of mountains. Jeremiah nodded, repeating it as if it were sacred. Naeli. In the days that followed, he tried to guide her, tried to make her trust him. But trust was not something that came easy to a woman torn from her people. She walked with him, but kept her distance, her hands always ready to defend, her eyes scanning the horizon. Jeremiah soon realized he hadn't bought a servant or a companion, he had freed a storm. One evening, when they camped by the river, she confronted him. "Why did you spend your last coin on me?" Her tone was sharp, accusing, as though daring him to say the wrong thing. Jeremiah looked at the river, at the reflection of the fading sun, and sighed, "Because no one should be owned. Not you, not anyone. I ain't got much left, Naeli, but I wasn't gonna let them break you." She studied him for a long moment, her anger softening into something else, something unreadable. From then on, she began to teach him things he had never known. She showed him how to track game with silence, how to listen to the wind and read its warnings, how to move with the land instead of against it. Jeremiah had always thought of freedom as owning a ranch, a herd, and a fence line to call his own. But Naeli showed him freedom was in the sky, unclaimed and endless. It was in the rivers, running without chains. It was in the heart, unbroken by men or money. Together, they grew stronger. He taught her to ride, not as a captive, but as a partner. She taught him to stand tall, not for pride, but for purpose. Soon, Jeremiah realized that while he had spent his last dollar to free her, she was the one who had truly freed him from despair, from hopelessness, from the lie that worth was measured in land or gold. But freedom always has a price. One morning, riders came thundering into the valley where they camped. It was the trader, furious that Jeremiah had made a mockery of him in town. With him were guns and cruel men eager to reclaim what they thought was theirs. Jeremiah and Naeli stood side by side. She clutched the bow she had carved with her own hands, while he loaded the rusty rifle he had carried since the war. "You can run," Jeremiah whispered, knowing he couldn't ask her to stay in the line of fire. "No," she answered firmly, her eyes flashing. "They think they own me, but I am not theirs. I am not even yours. I am mine." The battle that followed was fierce. Bullets tore through trees, arrows whistled through the air, and the ground shook with hooves. Jeremiah fought with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose, and Naeli fought with the spirit of a woman who had everything to defend. By the time the dust cleared, the traitor and his men lay scattered, broken by the very freedom they tried to crush. Jeremiah collapsed to his knees, blood on his hands, but alive. Naeli stood over him, strong as the mountains. Her eyes filled not with fear, but with triumph. She reached out her hand, not in gratitude, but in partnership. He took it, and in that grasp, Jeremiah felt something greater than survival. He felt purpose. They did not return to San Miguel. They did not seek land or riches. Instead, they rode together into the wild horizon. Two souls bound not by chains, but by choice. He had spent his last dollar to buy her, but what he gained was priceless. The knowledge that freedom cannot be owned, only shared. And as they disappeared into the vast open sky, Jeremiah knew one truth would stay with him forever. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what it means to truly be free. And to everyone listening to this story, remember, freedom is not about what you own, but about what you can let go of, what you can fight for, and who you choose to walk beside. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales of courage, love, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive and reaching those who need to hear them most. The days after the battle carried the weight of silence, not the silence of fear, but of healing, of choices waiting to be made. Jeremiah and Naeli rode deeper into the wilderness, far from the dusty towns and watchful eyes of men who thought freedom could be bought and sold. Their path cut through rivers cold as glass, canyons that swallowed the sun, and meadows where wild horses ran without reins. Jeremiah's body ached from wounds still raw, but his spirit stirred with a strange new fire, a sense that life was not something to endure, but something to fight for. Naeli watched him closely, never soft, never yielding. She was his teacher as much as his companion, showing him which herbs eased his pain, which stars guided them west, and which silences spoke more truth than words ever could. Jeremiah often wondered if she would one day leave him, return to her people, vanish into the mountains like a hawk breaking free of the earth. But when he asked, she only answered with the same calm certainty, "The wind decides when to change. So do I." And he respected her answer, for he had learned that true freedom was not in holding, but in letting one choose their own way. One night by the fire, with the moon painted silver across the desert, Naeli told him fragments of her past. She had been taken when her village was raided, bound and dragged away from the songs of her people. She had sworn never to bow, never to forget, and though the world had tried to cage her, her spirit had survived untouched. Jeremiah listened in silence, ashamed of the men who wore his same skin, who spoke his same language, yet carried hearts as cruel as iron. But Naeli did not speak to stir guilt. She spoke because she wanted him to understand that her freedom was not a gift he gave, but a truth she carried all along. The more time they spent together, the more Jeremiah realized how narrow his own dreams had been. Once he had thought of life only in acres of land, in head of cattle, in coins in his pocket. But now, under Naeli's gaze, he began to see that life was in the strength of a sunrise, in the laughter that sometimes escaped her lips when he stumbled clumsily, trying to learn her ways, in the trust that slowly grew between them like a fragile but unbreakable vine. Yet their peace was never meant to be simple. News of their defiance spread, carried by whispers through border towns, twisted by tongues eager for stories. Some said Jeremiah had stolen the girl, others claimed she bewitched him. Either way, men with greed in their eyes and hate in their hearts soon followed their trail. One dawn, as mist rolled over the valley, armed and cruel, hunters of riders appeared on the ridge, new men, bounties, and broken laws. Jeremiah and Naeli were forced to flee, racing through the wilderness with the pounding of hooves chasing their every breath. But here, the land itself became their ally. Naeli led Jeremiah through canyons so narrow no horse could follow, across rivers whose currents swallowed the careless, into forests where shadows cloaked their movements. Together, they became ghosts, vanishing where others would be trapped. Jeremiah learned quickly, his hands steadier, his instincts sharper. He was no longer a man running from failure, but a man running toward something greater, though he could not yet name it. In their flight, hunger gnawed at them, storms battered them, and doubt pressed heavy on Jeremiah's mind. More than once he asked if he was a burden to her, if she would be safer alone. Each time, Naeli's answer came not in words, but in action. When she saved him from a rattlesnake coiled near his boot. When she shared the last scrap of food, though her own belly was empty. When she placed her bow in his hands and said, "You must learn. Because freedom is not only mine, it is yours too." Days bled into weeks, and somewhere between running and surviving, their bond deepened. There was no declaration, no sudden fire of romance, but something more enduring: respect forged in hardship, loyalty born of choice. Jeremiah had freed her with a coin, but she had freed him with truth, with courage, with the reminder that every man, no matter how broken, can rise again. And yet, Jeremiah's heart carried a quiet fear that the day might come when Naeli would decide her path led away from him. He knew he could never cage her, never ask her to be less than the storm she was. He only prayed that when the wind shifted, she might still choose to walk beside him. That prayer was tested sooner than he imagined. In a hidden valley, they stumbled upon a camp of survivors, women and children of Naeli's, people who had escaped raids, weary but unbroken. The moment Naeli stepped into the circle of her kin, Jeremiah felt the ground shift beneath him. She belonged here, among her people, speaking their language, singing their songs. He watched her face soften in ways he had never seen, her laughter ringing free as she embraced those she thought lost. A knife of sorrow twisted in his chest, for he knew the wind had come, and it might carry her away from him forever. That night, while the camp sang around the fire, Jeremiah walked to the edge of the valley and stared at the stars. He told himself he had no right to hope, that freedom meant letting her choose her world, even if it meant leaving him behind. But just as the weight of loneliness settled over him, he heard her voice. "Why do you stand apart?" He turned to see her, there, her hair shimmering in the firelight, her eyes unyielding as ever. "Because you belong here," he said quietly. "And I don't." She stepped closer, the night air carrying her words like arrows. "Do you think freedom means to walk alone? Do you think I fought to be free, only to be torn from the one who stood with me?" Jeremiah's throat tightened. "I don't want to hold you back, Naeli." She reached out, her hand resting lightly against his chest, where his heart hammered like a wild horse. "Then don't hold me, walk with me, side by side." That is freedom. In that moment, Jeremiah understood. Freedom was not a road walked alone, nor was it a chain disguised as love. It was the choice to walk together, knowing either could leave, but both stayed because they wanted to. And so, when the dawn rose over the valley, Jeremiah and Naeli set out once more, this time not as a rescuer and rescued, not as a man bound by poverty and a girl bound by chains, but as equals, partners, and wanderers chasing the horizon. The road ahead would bring more battles, more trials, more men who sought to cage what could not be caged. But Jeremiah no longer feared the storm. He carried it with him, in her, and in himself. He had spent his last dollar to buy an Apache girl, but what he gained was a freedom no coin could ever measure. And to those listening now, remember, this life will test you, strip you down, break you if it can. But true freedom is not in what you own or in what you lose. It is in who you choose to become and who you choose to walk beside. If this story has touched your spirit, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there are more journeys, more truths, and more tales waiting for you here. Together, we'll ride farther than fear and learn what freedom truly means.